into the various different states, St. Louis, Chicago, about the mound builders and the Native Americans and, the Moors, and actually who these people were, who these tribes were. But he gets very detailed and in-depth. He breaks down genetically who they are by race, so he gets into a lot of historical information. He was on the show a few months ago. He called me and he wants to come back on this Thursday, so he's going to be on this Thursday night, and we're going to continue our conversation with that. And then this next Sunday, we're going to start doing here and there a Sunday night show. Dr. Delbert Blair is going to come back on next Sunday night on the 31st. That's at 8 o'clock. And then the big show that we got coming up on June 4th, which is the following Thursday, 2 Thursdays, we're going to have Brother Panic on. And we're going to be doing a whole show on the origin of hip-hop culture and music, its effects on spirituality and consciousness. Panic actually himself, before he was doing what he's doing now, he was actually a producer for Hank Shockley and the Bomb Squad. He did some of Public Enemy's music. He was part of that whole production team. So he's going to be coming on the show. His insight to hip-hop music and history of it is thorough. So we're going to have him on the show on the 4th. So those are the next 3 upcoming shows. Again, if you, I know most people, you're on the link. I know you're on the link. But if you get the link to people that may not have it, just forward it over to them. You know what I mean? Because we definitely want to do that. Oh, why is this thing not turning? Oh, it's upside down. All right. And again, Dr. Bynum will be on the show on the 18th. Now, this past Thursday, and the reason why I picked this topic, because to me, Dr. Bynum and Dr. Jewel Pookrum are very similar in what they teach and how they teach it. And I think what they teach on, to me, is the missing element of what we're missing. To me, it's the missing link in the information that everybody is seeking. What I mean by that is, most people tend to focus on the physical aspects of information or too much of the historical aspect of information. And like I've been saying for the last several months, it's great to reference Egypt, the dynasties, the deities. That's nice. It's great as a reference tool to build character, to build pride, to know the history. But again, to me, it's pointless and useless if we can't bring it forward, update it, and make that information current. Now, some of the key things, for an example, this past Thursday night, and we're going to talk about more in detail tonight, Dr. Jewel Pookrum was breaking down the essence and origin of melanin. So since that's one of the topics of this class, and one thing that she said that I thought was powerful was the origin of melanin begins, or the origin of it starts and is created in the brain. I thought this was powerful. And she said melanin is a manifestation of the electromagnetic spectrum. Think about that for a minute. It all really evolves from melanin. Now we're talking about obviously neuromelanin, which is brain melanin. Now she said something very similar along the lines that Dr. Bynum said. If you took an Asian, a Latino, and you took a African, a Caucasian, a mulatto, the capacity to create brain melanin doesn't vary regardless of your ethnicity or race. It does vary in its personification of neuromelanin, which is the physical skin melanin. So we have to establish that fact. The electromagnetic spectrum, which is an energy field. So this is deep because our melanin is that vortex or energy grid that draws these different energies to us. You understand? Good and bad. Now, we have to also factor this in. Something else she also explained. Melanin can take up to 1,500 degrees of heat. I'll say that again. This is talking about physical melanin. Melanin in general, neuromelanin, both aspects of it, can take up to 1,500 degrees of heat. So now, ask yourself, why is it that a black person can't withstand being in the sun in 92-degree heat? And she explained why. Because I asked her that. I said, then why is it? Because she said the melanin molecule is damaged. So let's talk about that for a minute. All right. Melanin also cools itself, or can cool itself, by 50% of the temperature. So whatever heat it absorbs, it automatically cools it by 50% of the temperature. We have to factor this in when dealing with the brain and dealing with the skin melanin. Now, this took me back to something Dr. Blair told me. Dr. Blair said the sun really isn't hot. When you're dealing with melanin and heat, it's not really hot, it's actually cold. And I didn't understand what that really meant, but now, listening to Dr. Jewell break it down, Dr. Bynum break it down, and then listen to Dr. Blair put it together, now I understand what it means. That it's the melanin that's the cooling factor in the heat aspect. Now, for a person that has melanin, a melanated person, and again, she explained it could vary from the lightest of light, because we have varying different degrees of melanin. We have to establish that. And there's 4 major races, but 7 subspecies that break out of those races. Everybody's relationship to melanin in the sun varies depending on their level of melanin, which that's common sense. I don't even think anybody needs that explained to them. So, if it's the electromagnetic spectrum or the manifestation of it, okay, we have to factor in several different things. For an example, if physically you can't withstand the sun or the heat, your melanin molecule is damaged. Now, to show you that melanin heats up, she said, for an example, if it's hot outside and you go eat meat or something heavy or something that's hot, say if she used this as an example, say it's 90+ degrees out, you go eat a hot hamburger and you're outside, your body's going to start to get so hot and overheated because the animal fat, she says fat is attracted to melanin. And melanin, that's why a lot of our women, African women, are big boned, because it's bad when a lot of African women eat large volumes of meat. It also increases the hormone levels where they can become just on a compatible level, male-wise as female-wise. Meaning, she said that's why most black women will get into a black man's chest, because hormone-wise they're almost on the same level. They can, they have no problem reacting or getting in your chest or wanting to fight you. She says, whereas maybe a more woman that doesn't eat meat, their genetic structure, their hormone is different. That's not saying do or do not eat meat completely. It's just saying if you're taking high intakes of meat. And the fat in the meat actually heats up the melanin more. So if you eat that burger outside on a 90+ degree day, now you've got the molecule, the melanin molecule that's damaged. You got the fat from the meat that's heating it up even more. This is why you feel like I'm hot, or I feel like I don't want to move, I'm weak, I'm incapacitated, or I need to get into air conditioning, or I need to get into something, I need something cold to drink, because literally your melanin is on fire. You understand that? So we have to factor those different things, and we have to factor in fat is attracted to melanin. And melanin produces fat naturally, the good fat that we need. So you don't need a high fat intake diet if your melanin is right. This is very important to understand why some of us are all jacked up. So the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay. Now we have to factor in, if we are taking care of this melanin, okay, we are opening ourselves up and being receptive to positive energy by way of our thoughts. Now, this is important to understand. If we're thinking all the time, and here was another example that was used on the show. If you start thinking in your mind and making the statement, oh, the sun is hot, I can't take the heat, your melanin actually starts to work against you. That's powerful. Because you're reversing your DNA structure. Those thoughts are assimilated and processed through the brain, and now it actually starts to happen. It starts to work against you, where now you will have a problem staying in the heat of the sun, because you've already convinced the subconscious mind, and that's filtering it out through all the blood cells. And what tends to happen as you get sick, when melanin reverses itself against you, now you have an imbalance in white and red blood cells. Okay? Especially more so white blood cells. So now this is where sicknesses, illness, and diseases start creeping in. This is why we get sick. Because 90% of the time it's a spiritual disconnect. Because, again, I've said this, I've heard Dr. Bynum say it, I heard Dr. Jewell say it this past Thursday. There's always, at the root of every illness, is spiritual. Doesn't matter what it is. Don't matter if it's cancer. It doesn't matter. There's a spiritual disconnect there that was overlooked. And sometimes it's a condition that we're taught from a very early age. And here's another example used. We were programmed all the time, if the nose is running, I gotta go get NyQuil. I got a headache or a fever, I need to go get aspirin. So literally your subconscious being programmed with sickness, whether you're aware of it or not. So this is a mental process that has to be reversed, because we attract these energies and these thoughts by way of our melanin, good and bad. Because if it is the doorway to the electromagnetic spectrum that manifests these thoughts, now we have to redress it on that level. So, now I'm not saying it's as easy as to walk around and think, I'm going to be a millionaire. That's not what I'm saying. It's not hocus pocus like that. But you have to start thinking positive thoughts. And the visualization process is important, because you become what you think. Let me say that again. You become what you think. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. If you think you're a loser, a failure, that you don't do anything right, then you become that. The only thing that reverses that, you have to visualize what it is you want to become, and you have to start thinking along those lines.
Is it similar to the mind over matter?
You can use that analogy, but you have to put things into practice. Yes, mind over matter, because if you start letting the physical things weigh you down, then it could become that battle. So yes, you have to focus more on the mental aspect of things than the physical aspect of things.
You kind of answer what I was going to ask, is that people from the island, like when I was in Jamaica,
right,
we didn't know what art is with the sun. It's natural.
Right.
Get up, and it's when I came over here about temperatures 98 degree and 80 something degree. Down there we just move and just move. We never think about, you know, the sun.
Right.
Being burned out in the sun or anything like that.
Right.
So as I said, it's something that if you think about it, then you think about the sickness of it.
Yeah.
But we just usually move, and I'm thinking of people in the hot climate. It's different from people that live here with hot and cold, because we don't think about the temperature.
Nope.
You go to Jamaica and you see people have on jacket and coat, and I keep laughing. I say, man, these people are crazy. You know, why can't we have in jacket, you know? And it's so hot out here, but they don't feel it.
Yeah.
To me, they don't feel it. You
right.
know, it's like it's natural to them. So you can go ahead, yeah.
So it's very, and that's a good point. It's very, very important for us to understand that concept, because this to me is the element that's missing to take us to that next level. Rather than just talk about it, because like I said, one wake-up call for me was, you could sit and study the history of Egypt all day. You could study the history of any part of Africa. That's great. You could walk around with your head up and feeling proud. But if you don't take any of this information and apply it, right. Because we got to realize the planet is constantly changing, constantly growing and evolving. So is our consciousness. Our consciousness is constantly evolving. So there's a trap and a trick in that itself when we stay back in the glory days of the past. That's what I mean when I say that. But
that's what I always thought that was a problem in general, that we don't master ourselves.
I just run right. Go ahead.
Yeah, we don't master ourselves. We don't try to really take full control of who we are. We don't know who we are, and you know, really, like, I guess, like, yeah, master ourselves in a broader spectrum, as far as how to know how to adjust with what's going on right now.
That's true. Now, another thing in dealing with this scientific concept, the other aspect that comes up that weighs you down and keeps you from evolving and can even get you sick if you harbor thoughts about past things. This was something that was discussed. Meaning, the problem is we have a lot of people amongst us walking around talking about shit that happened 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And some people are still stuck in it. Some people are still bitter about it. And the problem is this also damages their melanin, and it also damages the electromagnetic spectrum, where it creates blocks. This was something that we discussed. The power of thought is so detrimental to our effects spiritually more than we're conscious of it. So this is why I was saying, when you were asking a question earlier about people that For example, when you were mentioning the Nubians, why some of them can't change or they get stuck, it could be them. It could be a brother or sister you know who's still in the Nation of Islam and still stuck under that mentality or school of thought. What tends to happen in a situation like that, they're constantly pump-fed with information about how great they were in the past. You know, you're the original Asiatic black man, blah, 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 blah. They're reading lessons that are outdated. So they're still stuck there. And guess what? Mentally, they are there, whether they're conscious of it or not. If you're dealing with a certain time point, you're stuck in that time point. You're there. So now you have people that are still captivated by incidences that took place in the past. So now they're stuck there. Those are hard people to reach. Sometimes those people are harder to reach than a religious fanatic or somebody that's, you know, out there on a faith-based mindset. So the power of thought is heavy in the sense of the effects that it has on us, and it can cause illness. Now, if you're a person that holds grudges and you're constantly harboring, and you might have not let something go, and the people you're holding grudges on not even giving you a thought, that also can get you sick. It can break down the nervous system. It can break down your mind. You can have nervous breakdowns, and it also damages that electromagnetic spectrum if you're just constantly pissed off at people for dumb stuff. So we have to learn to let those things go and let the consciousness evolve, because the planet is evolving, so is consciousness. If we're not evolving with it, we basically get lost in the shuffle. So that's important to understand, and I think this is the element that we're missing. So if you're studying all this Egyptian history, you know about Ankh-Enkhten, you know about Osiris or Osir, Aset, you know about Geb, Nut, Ra, Satuk. That's great. But how does that apply in 2015? We have to understand those are representations of the archetypes that exist in our DNA. Outside of the first incarnation of what we call the Holy Family, which would be Osir, Aset, and Heru, all those prior to him were representations of archetypes that exist in your DNA. They took the religious story, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, from those characters. Now, those were actual people that walked the earth. But when you read the stories of Geb and Nut and Shu, these were stories that were written down to actually describe what goes on in the mind and inside the DNA, because they represent archetypes of your nature and your DNA. This is the scientifical and the factual aspect of it. Now, there's not literally a being called Shu. That doesn't exist. There's a representation of Shu that exists inside of you. You understand? Now, the great dynasties, the pharaohs, the kings, starting with the incarnation of the Holy Family, this is the structure that they set up to teach us and pass this system, because all of these systems were given to us to instill discipline in us and to raise our consciousness. Now, let me give you an example. Most people that practice any type of African traditional worship system or spiritual system today will never get the full benefits of it, and I'm going to explain to you why. We can use either Egyptology, or we can use, for an example, the Yoruba culture. Okay? Those systems of initiation, for an example, were set up at that time for those conditions, for a certain mindset of those people, and they lived a certain way at that time. That doesn't apply to us here in America. So they don't have the same effects on the psyche and on the subconscious as they would have when they were instilled in that environment, as opposed to here in America. Let me give you an example. And I'm going to use an example Brother Panic used on the show a couple months ago. For an example, there's an initiation in Santeria where they use a gun, and it's to instill a certain amount of fear where it's part of an initiation and the gun is stuck in your face. It represents something. I'm not going to get to the whole thing. Now, for an example, back in certain areas where, say, somebody grew up not being around guns, that would frighten that individual, right? Now, say you did that, for an example, to Tukey Williams, the guy that just passed away. He was he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He used to be a gang member. Everybody remember Tukey Williams.
Crip, right?
He was a Crip, yeah. Any gang member. Now, if you pulled that gun on, say, a gang member that sees guns on a regular basis, that's not going to have the same effect on his psyche and his consciousness, because he sees it all the time, or she sees it all the time. I'm using that as a metaphor to understand those systems only affect the psyche based on the type of environment you came up in. Now they don't work completely the same way on us here in America, because we were raised more in an advanced technological society. So we're using more primitive rituals that don't have the same effect on the subconscious. So they still use a lot of the tradition-based systems mixed in with modern day stuff, so it doesn't give you the same effect. So that's why they don't work for us. Now, you can also become a slave in those systems, because then you become under the mentality of servitude, because a lot of those systems, you got to do this, you got to burn a candle for this, you have to do this ritual. So now it kind of sets you along another path mentally. So those systems of worship only can take you, or systems of spirituality, whatever you want to call it, can only take you so far. They don't work. So the question is, where should we be at this day and time, 2015? Where should our mindset be? Now, you hear Dr. Delbert Blair talking about all the time, the planet is going from a third dimensional existence to a fifth dimensional existence, 5. Now you say, what happened to 4? We're in 4 right now, whether you're aware of it or not. You're only aware of it if you've started raising your vibration, because you always hear him say that. We're in that transitional stage. We're in a 4-dimensional existence now as we speak. Those that have raised themselves up to the realization of it have access to that 4-dimensional existence by way of meditation, by way of doing certain things with the chakras, by way of doing certain exercises, if you want to call them. So the 4th dimensional existence is upon us now as we speak. It's here. Now you say, I don't see it. Then if you don't see it, guess what? You got work to do. That's the best thing I can tell you, because nobody's going to make you see it. Okay? The 5th dimensional deals with a pure state of mental telepathy, being able to communicate from mind to mind. This is where we're going. And those beings that are not in tune, these are the beings that now, those that don't have a soul, okay, and don't have a soul, that doesn't mean the white man. That's not just exactly what I'm talking about. That means white man, black man, Asian man, Latino man, all those that have forfeited their soul and lost their connection, they will not be able to stay here no more. Spiritually, they will destroy themselves. We don't have to do anything. All we need to do is just step aside, because you're seeing the madness take place in the world right now. It's happening. So we're going to look through this matrix system, which is one of the other titles of this class, the luminous matrix reality, because now it's all a matrix. It's fictitious. If you're in tune with the 4th dimension, you can see through it now and see the things on the news. And I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for anybody else, because I can only relate to what I see. So I can't tell you to accept what I'm saying until you raise yourself up to it. All I can do is share certain experiences with you, but I'm not saying to accept everything I'm about to say as being factual until you can prove it and confirm it for yourself. For an example, somebody is strategically staging these police shootings. It's part of the matrix system. Just had another one. This Ohio officer just got off. They're riding over there. There was another one that just took place a few days ago. They're happening so much now that, yeah, you got to catch it on the news. Somebody is strategically setting things up to fuck with you mentally. Now the other thing is, if you just saw last week that big biker shooting in Waco, Texas, who read about it? Okay, now watch this. If you pull up the images from that shooting, they have the police line set up. Watch this now, pay attention. You see the police officer standing there with his gun, with his back towards the bikers. The bikers are all sitting down, talking, texting on their phones. They handled it like it was a social gathering. Multiple people got killed, murdered, and multiple people, over 200 people, got seriously, critically wounded and injured. The police handled it like it was a social gathering. Go pull up the footage and watch the very casual handling of the situation. But when they handled the riots, per se, in Baltimore, they bring in the National Guard. Somebody's messing with your psyche. They bring in the state police, the local police. They put on riot gear. So somebody is trying to create a certain image and stamp it in your subconscious mind, because they're trying to let melanated people know we're coming for you. We're coming to your neighborhoods. We're trying to instill in you that you can't govern yourselves. But meanwhile, here was a massive multi-gang fight biker shooting amongst mostly, I'm not saying there wasn't any black members in those gangs, but for the most part it was Caucasian gang bike members, and the police handled it. I mean, you can see pictures of the police standing around talking, giggling, talking to the bikers that are in the gangs. When the bikers are being detained, they're on their phones texting. Do you think that would have happened in Baltimore? No. That's seeing through the matrix, understand, and putting it into its perspective. Now, if you're one of those people that are reacting off a raw emotion, like, I want to go out there and I want revenge, then you're worse off than some of those people that are caught up in it, because that's the reaction they're trying to get out of you. And like I said, when the pineal gland is calcified, or the root chakra isn't vibrating at the right frequency, you tend to become more reactive than proactive. Now, per se, those, and I can speak around me, some people around me might, I've had people make comments like, things that used to bother you don't bother you no more, because I don't give a shit no more, because certain things are not worth your energy and your attention. Here's another thing, like you brought up before the class, I'll address that real quick. Like 6, 7, 8 years ago, I would have gotten to a religious debate with somebody. But now I realize that's a waste of time and energy, because those people are spiritual vampires sucking the energy and the life out of you. Because if you sit there and dialogue for 3 hours with a religious person, and you could be smashing them upside the head with facts and science and history and metaphysics and etc. But guess what? At the end of the day, they're still going to walk away from their conversation with the same mindset. So you only entertain it if you see a genuine interest and they really want to talk and dialogue. Then you put your energy into it. But you're doing what they want you to do. They've penetrated your electromagnetic spectrum by way of your brain melanin if they get you into the argument or the debate. Understand? Now, I do believe there's times you have to turn on and whoop ass on somebody. Then if somebody gets ignorant, you need to just squash it and let them know, I don't care. You understand? So this is being in tune with that fourth density level if you know how to take situations and put them into perspective and address them. That's where we're at now, because we're in that cross from fourth to fifth dimension. Now, what we've been hearing about for years, Nibiru, Planet X, Rilo 7, the different names they talk about this mothership or mother planet, we're gonna be able to start seeing the visualizations of this by 2019. This is a fact. We're gonna start seeing it. It's getting this close to our planet, and we're gonna start seeing consciousness go to a level that we've never seen before. We will also see the separation mentally and spiritually in each individual. Each individual will know how to get in line, how to get into perspective, and exactly where they stand. Now, the ones that are just asleep, they're asleep. There's not going to be any difference to them. But those people are going to become more reactional, they're going to become more physical, and they're going to become very emotional. And we have to be conscious of that, because we're going to recognize it in it, and we see the sickness it's creating amongst people all over the world with all the crazy stuff that's going on in the news. Murders. People carelessly killing with no remorse. Like this one dude the dude in D.C. that just murdered that whole family. The 10-year-old boy was tortured and burnt. No consciousness. Because they're evolving on a demonic mind state. Tied the family up, bound them for death. Let me tell you something. The dude ordered a pizza. Let me show you how fucked up people are in the head right now. The dude ordered a pizza in the midst of holding these people for several days while torturing and killing. This is how he got busted, because they found his DNA on the crust of the pizza. You read about it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But just think of the consciousness that a person has, the conscious, or lack of conscious, where you're in the midst of, you have people held captive and you've been torturing them, and on the second day you're hungry, you order a pizza, you don't care. This is the mindset of those that are going the other way now. We're not talking about if you feel like you're the individual that's on the right path. Now you got to be cautious of those going the other way. Okay? I want to read this, because it's kind of what we were talking about. This is from Dark Light Consciousness, Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum. From the beginning, we must free our conception of evolution from the chains of purely earthbound life. Let me say that again. From the beginning, we must free our conception of evolution from the chains of purely earthbound life. If you're caught up in the physical, like I just said, living in the past, the glamour of Egypt, that's great. But if we don't get out of that, it becomes a chain or an entrapment. It holds us down, right? Evolution is occurring on all the planes of existence. From that tiny amoeba to the vast life of cosmogenesis. It extends fathoms below human consciousness and arches realms above and beyond it. Child development and neontology, along with near-death experience research, inform us that we are conscious for months before our physical birth. Did you hear that? We are conscious for months in the womb before our physical birth. Now, let me establish this. People with higher levels of melanin mature quicker than people with lower levels of melanin. The average highly melanated person whose mind is operating on its normal to full capacity matures at the age of 14. Let me say that again. That's why you'll see mostly a highly melanated child at the age of 14 is going to be more mature for the most part. This does not mean that anybody melanated is immature or can be. That's not what I'm saying. But research shows that a highly melanated child at the age of 14, as opposed to, say, a Caucasian child, is more mature and more mentally developed. That's a scientific fact. Due to the high levels of melanin and the manifestation of this electromagnetic spectrum. And if they're taught correctly, and this is why they know this, and this is why most of us are worked upon at an early age, they don't want the dark-skinned melanated person to be highly educated, because when they use their full brain capacity, they're far more superior than any other being on the planet. It's a scientific fact. They know this, so they work more to attack the highly melanated person. There's a personal psyche and spiritual attack on that person, because they know that person can reach such high levels of divinity that sky's the limit, and they fear that. Okay?
So what about the child they call a genius? Who's a genius?
Right.
It's a person like that.
Yeah, well, genius, everybody has their own opinion on what that means. That means, you know, it can mean somebody that's super smart, somebody that's a brain. You know, you hear all these different terminologies. Now remember, a genius, Caucasian, Latino, if they're using the full capacity of the neuromelanin of the brain, anybody can raise themselves up to that level.
But there's one thing I always believe, that there's a difference in being wise and being smart.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, of course, sometimes it seems to intertwine, but there's definitely two different routes. The
Wisdom,
way you process thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So one day, you know, I don't know about, you know, the whole genius thing. To me, you know, on the spiritual level, I would think it's a little overrated.
Right. Well, there's a thing you said. When do you know? This is where you take the system, for an example, of Ma'at and apply it to today. Because remember, everything requires, on the physical and spiritual realm, balancement.
Right.
So, like you say, where there's a difference between being smart and wisdom, because each breaks down into categories. And each can be assimilated and applied on different levels.
Right.
Because somebody can be crafty and wise as a fox, right? And you can be smart, but not smart per se, or perceived in a good way. You can be smart and use that smart to harm somebody.
Right.
So is that something that's good, being smart? Is that crafty way? I mean, it just all depends on the level of perception. Now, that's where I would apply the system of Ma'at. And that's why a couple months ago I focused on the classes of the 7 principles of Tahuti, to get you to understand how the two are married to each other. You can't have one without the other. You don't understand the system of Ma'at without not fully studying and mastering the 7 principles of Tahuti. It's impossible. So most people get caught up in the system of Ma'at because they don't understand the principles of Tahuti. because the principles of Ma'at kind of touch on the spiritual, but it makes you more focused on the physical. Like in the principles of Ma'at, it deals with the 42, in some of the laws of Ma'at, thou shalt not steal. That's physical. When you go back into the 7 principles of Tahuti, it takes you on a mental level. It deals with the vibrational aspect of it, the energy aspect of it, and the mind aspect of it, which that's a vibrational state, a thought that's taken from the mental, because everything is mental. Remember, the first principle of Tahuti was the principle of the mind. All is the mind, mentalism. It's the first principle. We're talking about that right now and dealing with melanin, the brain, and the mind. Man, let me tell you something. If you really sit down, and you hear me talk about it all the time, if you really sit down and study the 7 principles of Tahuti, the effect it'll have on your subconscious mind is, I can't even put it into words. You got to really study it and meditate on it. A tool you can use is take a principle, right, read it, study it, and then finish that study period and meditate on that one principle after you read it. Alright? Now, to get to this mental capacity, here's another good exercise you could do. Okay? Most people need to get in tune with the realm of darkness. Let me say that again. This is dealing with dark light consciousness now. Most people need to get in tune with the realm of pure darkness. Alright? Now, if a religious person heard me say that, they would perceive that as satanic and satanic worship and, you know, all the other nonsense that comes along with it. Here's a ritual how you can get in touch and connect with your spiritual DNA. Go into a dark room, completely dark, void of any type of sound. Make the room as completely dark as you can. Okay, visualize in your meditation a spiral staircase. However you need to visualize it. Visualize that staircase going down. Okay? Visualize it going down. You will find as you're going down or you're going lower, you will start to contact your innermost thoughts when you see the representation of that ritual. Now, when you do that ritual, you will incur a bunch of positive and good thoughts about yourself, good and bad. Okay? When those thoughts or different range of emotions come over you, that's how you know you've opened yourself up in that exercise and connected with your DNA. I mean, you'll see all crazy stuff. You'll see, and I say crazy not in a bad way, you'll see childhood moments when you do it. You'll see people in the past that you were connected to. Could be relatives, friends, family, etc. You'll see little incidences that took place as a child, as an adult, as recent as 2 weeks ago, back to 20, 30 years ago. The amazing thing about it is this will all happen in the blink of an eye. You'll experience them all again, but you'll find out only a few moments went by. That's the power of this meditative ritual and this whole exercise. I use that as one example. There's many you can do. There's no right or wrong way. You can create your own. It's just, I'm just giving you one simple example of how you can tap into that. That process has to be started first. Okay? Now, when understanding, and we'll talk about near-death experience, when understanding, again, like Dr. Jewel Pookrum said, and if you didn't hear the show, you can go back, it's archived, you can listen to it. To me, this is just my opinion, I think she's the best female teacher out there because of the spiritual stuff she breaks down. I think she breaks it down on a level that nobody's breaking it down like her. That's just my opinion. The stuff that she was breaking down on the show Thursday night, I mean, it had my jaw dropping because she was going to a level that I just don't think people talk about. Now, listen to the statement again, and I want you to meditate on it. And she explained it clearly. She said, if the origin of melanin is in the brain, and melanin is the manifestation of the electromagnetic spectrum, the energy grid, that exists inside of our mind, our bodies, and our DNA. We have to focus on that. Okay? And it varies based on your levels of melanin, neuro and neural, and your relationship to melanin and the sun. This is going to determine the type of spiritual journey you have to take mentally to raise your consciousness as your consciousness evolves. Now, back to the other fact as another thing, and I'm going to touch on it here, taking it out of Dr. Bynum's book. Remember, people with higher levels of melanin are under more of a spiritual attack because like she said, highly leveled melanated people mature quicker than anybody on the planet, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So the average highly melanated person, if they're taught right, at the age of 14, they're at a high mature level. Again, this is why highly melanated people are attacked and focused on spiritually, because again, they know if those people are worked on spiritually, they pose the biggest danger on the planet, because the sky is the limit. All right? Now, we are conscious, as we were just reading, in the womb for months before we are physically birthed into the universe. Okay? And for an extended period after our physical death. That's heavy. So after your physical death, consciousness. Okay, let's talk about that. During our existence within the life of the body and mind as we know it, our consciousness is structured by these parameters. All the while, the great traditions confess that through the fields of post-mortem life, the principle of our development is animated by our psychic and spiritual aspiration. This is what shapes it. By our fears and by our desires. The inner mind appears to be a quiet river until that curled up and shining portion of us meets the luminous, immaterial, and boundless non-local light that oceanic intelligence, our genius, calls God consciousness. Spiritual discipline flows from this realization. An unshakable conviction flowers in this light. Do not confuse or limit existence and reality with its expressions in matter, space, and time. Let me say that part again. Do not confuse or limit existence and reality with its expressions in matter, space, and time. So what are we talking about here? What are we gravitating to in that statement right there? These are the things that shape our spiritual consciousness, and this is why we perceive things the way that we perceive things. It's based on experiences. We carry those experiences, like Dr. Bynum is saying here, when we make that transition in the beginning stages from the physical to the spiritual, because we have to work our way through that as we go on that journey and evolve spiritually. That's powerful. To me, that's powerful, because this is, to me, the information, and again, I'm going to use these two individuals tonight, Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum and Dr. Jewel Pooper. I think these are the two individuals that are putting links there that we're missing. That's my opinion.
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So
No, go ahead.
And another way, it's more to say your experience basically shapes who you are as a being, and how you translate these experience also dictates how you go, how you transfer to the next.
It has an effect on it, correct. Definitely. It shapes the experience from what this is saying. Now, remember, we have to get through that block, because once we shed all that, then we can become what we like to term a being of eternal life force, or what we term living in eternity. I'm just going to use metaphors that we can grasp. Not being bound or restricted by anything that would weigh us down, because our experiences will shape the journey, but we have to work our way through any of those limitations that might hold us back. Now, everybody's journey is different, because fact of the matter is, nobody can really say what's going to happen when they go through that transition stage. We got ideas based on information that has been left behind, but everybody's journey is personal, and everybody's journey when it comes to that aspect of our existence is going to vary. Everybody's not going to be the same. Now, yes, we can refer back to, for an example, the opening of the mouth ceremony. That gave us a general idea of what it represented. Now, does it exactly happen like that? No, of course not. We don't really know how it's going to happen. Nobody can really tell you exactly step by step how it's going to happen. Now, some people might have the experience factor and might have had personal out-of-body experiences or personal spiritual experiences, but it's just that, it's personal. That was for you. Now, you can share those personal experiences with an individual But that necessarily doesn't mean it would apply to he or she exactly in that way. Usually when we have a personal experience like that, that personal experience was for us. And it was our ancestors speaking to our DNA, trying to show us something. Because like you said earlier, you had an experience in that dream state where you left your body, you saw an image of yourself there, but it didn't quite look like you. Now remember, we have multiple manifestations of who we are by DNA. So don't go by what you look like physically, that's the only you. You understand? Because remember, I talked about last time, if you raise yourself up, this is not the first time you're here on the planet Earth. Now I can't prove that to you. You got to raise yourself up to that reality. You'll find that you might see things that may not be familiar to you now, in this now, but you probably saw another aspect of you in another existence or another incarnation. You understand what I'm saying? Now you have to raise yourself up to that. I can't prove that to you. You understand? I can't sit down and try to slam that into your subconscious, because if you accept it without confirming it or experiencing it, then we've just started another faith-based system. We don't want to do that. So that's why I tell people, and I told you, write that information down. You should keep a log of it, because I can bet you this, you will have another experience that's connected to it, that will actually answer what just happened to you recently. What are you going to say?
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's why I need your help. We need
yeah, my question is still listening to everything is what is spirituality? What is spirit?
All right.
Because to me, it's like it have a unrighteous and a righteous part.
Yeah.
But you're talking as if it's just a righteous.
It's not, because
what
spirituality, when I say spirituality, again, this is how I'm going to perceive it.
Yeah.
Now, your definition might be different, yours. Everybody's not going to have the same definition.
Right.
I don't even like to use that word. I use it because if you're talking to a group of people, you have to use a word. Now, maybe you're beyond that, but you have to use a word that people can grasp. I don't even like to use that word, to be honest with you. Spirituality to me is just a representation of different vibrations and energy. That's it. That's how I perceive spirituality. Now, I don't even want to say good or bad, because what I might term as good, you may not. What I might term as bad and vice versa, you may not. So again, it goes back to that quote we just read from Dr. Bynum's book. Our experiences are going to shape how we perceive those things.
But the question is, why I ask that question too, is whoever controls Earth right now, is there a spiritual level?
Yes, I didn't hear the first part. What you said?
Whoever controls Earth.
A controlled Earth.
Control, yeah. Like
Okay.
like the killing that's going on,
Okay.
these people doing all these things.
Right.
Are these people on a spiritual level?
No. Here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
I use the term also. You're either part of the experiment or you're controlling the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
First, we have to get locked in our mind. Like, all right, you hear people, for an example. Speaking of controlled Earth, spirituality, incidences that are taking upon the planet all over the world right now as we speak.
I feel like the Illuminati.
Correct.
They're on a spiritual level or not?
Yes, because they can tap into what we call those energy forces and make that energy work for them against those that may not be conscious of it. It can only work against you if you allow it to. Now, here's the example. And we discussed this on the show. We have all these things that people say that people are doing to attack us. Chemtrails, right? Genetically modified foods, right? We can sit here and talk about, I'm sure people can come up with all these different things that supposedly the Illuminati and all these other people on the planet are doing. And they are doing it, right? But we got to keep this in mind. If they're coming with all these different things, what is that confirmation of? Think about it for a minute. Let me say it again. They're messing with the food, they're messing with the water, they're messing with the weather. This is a fact. This is going on. They got weather machines. They can change the weather. This is science. This is not nothing spooky. They can genetically modify the food through cloning. This is a fact. There's nothing spooky. We know they're putting chemtrails and metals in the atmosphere, and we're breathing it in. This is a fact. We know this. Now, that's just 3 things I named, and I'm sure there's a bunch more we could talk about. If they're doing all these things, what is that confirmation of? Think about it real hard. That not one thing is working. Because they have to do multiple things. That also should incite in you mentally that you still have the power to overcome and control it by taking the necessary measures. Like, for an example, Dr. Blair talks about the dyads. Putting them on your cell phones, blocking the radiation levels out, not eating some of the genetically modified foods. getting into some of that aspect of it. I'm just using basic examples. Now, I'm not saying that just doing those things, that's it. I'm just giving you examples. But what I'm saying is it's still, you are still the divine being. You have control over your existence. It can only affect you if you can allow it. Now, here's where the mental aspect comes in. You can't just attack it physically. Remember we talked about thoughts, consciousness. If melanin is the manifestation of the electromagnetic field, you control that electromagnetic field by taking care of your neuromelanin. If the origin of melanin begins in the brain, where does the origin of every problem and solution begin? In the brain, by thought power. This is the information that we're missing because we're getting caught up in the physical struggle. Now, by all means, I'm not saying ignore the physical. We have to. We're subjecting to the physical on a daily basis. But what I'm saying is we have to have the balancement. We can't just, people are just focusing on the physical things that are being done to us and not applying the spiritual. And we have to look at both sides of this. And that's why one thing she said, and Dr. Blair said this, Dr. Bynum said this, the root of every problem is spiritual. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a physical ailment. It could be an imbalancement in your life where things are chaotic in your life and you're going through a series of problems. There's a block on that energy grid that's creating this energy around you that's causing these problems. So you have to go internal through meditation or that little ritual that we talked about not too long ago. That's one way. There is no right or wrong way. When you get in tune with that inner being that exists within you, that consciousness will start talking to you, and it might tell you to do something, take this and sit over here and light it, whatever. There's no right or wrong way. It's your way. And whatever your spirit speaks to you to do, like this question came up on the show. Somebody had called in Thursday night and said they wanted to know more about altars and shrines and setting up things for your ancestors. Now, one thing that we had talked about, symbols should be charged before you put it on your altar, and let me explain. When you wear symbols like this, they should be charged with your energy. You shouldn't just buy this from a store and put it around your neck, because this is housing energy from everybody that touched it, processed it, and made it. That energy is still on it when you put it around your neck if you didn't charge it with your own spiritual energy. Every year, once a year, you should always recharge your amulets that you wear. There's a ritual you do, it's real simple. You take all your amulets. You could do this, for an example, when you first buy, even if you make it yourself. Some people like to make ankhs, handcraft, and make them themselves. That's even better because now it's got your stamp on it. But the greatest thing to do is put a little small table in front of your shrine or your altar, put your amulets, whatever you wear, ankhs, any Egyptian symbols, African symbols, whatever. And you put it in front of your altar, and you could take, just give an example, there's no right away. You can use either sage, you can use rock, frankincense, and myrrh, something that has powerful spiritual properties and is a spiritual cleanser, and you smoke your amulets out, and you say an invocation over them. For an example, just basic. There's no, and again, there's not a specific invocation to say. You can say, I call upon the power of my DNA ancestors to infuse these elements with the spiritual energy. Let that spiritual energy manifest through these amulets and work as a spiritual charge for me mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. You can say that. Let them sit there after you charge them overnight, a couple of hours, at least leave them there for a couple of hours, and then wear these amulets. That's one way to charge your amulets. As far as what putting on the altar, okay, you can put any implements on there that your spirit speaks to. The only thing I wouldn't put on there is pictures of people in your family that are alive. Because if it's an ancestral altar, it should only be for those that have made the transition. And you could make a disconnect, well, not that that's the wrong word. You could make an interference with the spiritual and the physical world if you put a picture of a live individual that's currently alive on your altar. It's not a good thing to do. If you know some things in your family that say your grandmother's on there, if there was a chain or something you have, an object of hers, you could put that on there. You could decorate it with whatever your spirit says. The three elements you should always have on it, though, regardless of what system you practice. It could be West Africa, it could be Egypt. You should always have something on the altar that represents the four major elements. Very important. Water. You should have some type of earth on there. Like I have on mine, actual sand from the pyramids of Giza. I have it in a small bag, tied up. That represents the earth element. Obviously, you should change the water. Always have clean water on there every several days. That represents the water element. The candle would represent the fire element, okay? And the incense would represent the wind element, okay? You should always have those 4 elements have to be on any spiritual altar you work with. That's a must. So as long as you have that on there, you can create and make and add to it from that point, whatever your spirit tells you. And you'll know. And if you just get a thought like, oh, this feels right, I'm putting this on my altar, that's your spirit speaking to you. So, in short, real simple, there is no right or wrong way. Again, it's your way. Because I guarantee you, everybody's going to have a slight different variation of how they do it. So, when that question was posed, there is no right or wrong way, so you can't tell somebody you have to do it like this, you have to put that there. That really don't work. You understand? Because again, if it's not charged with your energy, it's not going to be as effective. It's the same thing when you take spiritual baths. You should charge those baths with your energy. Something that I know works for me, I create my own bath. I like to put it by my shrine, right at the bottom, and I keep it there for 24 hours. And then I bathe in it the next night. That works for me because I get the most benefits from it. Will that work for everybody else? I don't know. But I know that works for me. That's another aspect.
Oh yeah, actually, right. All right. In the universe, right? Universe always has a need, always works to balance itself out, right?
Right.
Is that why, I guess the negative spirits or the negative energy is always hovering around at a certain point, or is it necessary? I guess for the universe itself.
All right. Let's say this. I want to go back because I've meditated on this hard ever since she said it to me. Remember, melanin is the manifestation of the electromagnetic spectrum. It starts with brain power. So whatever you're determining, negative or positive energy, and again, that's going to be your own personal determination. You're attracting that energy to you for a reason by your thoughts. Because remember, your thoughts can get you sick. We were just talking about this on the show. If you're a person that's harboring grudges all the time, you're pissed off at people all the time, and like Dr. Jules said, people are still talking about stuff that happened 5 and 6 years ago, and they're not realizing the effect it has on them subconsciously, and how it reverses the melanin to work against you. Like I said, let's go back to this. Let me use this metaphor again, if you didn't catch it the first time. Like she explained, melanin, for an example, can take up to 1,500 degrees of heat. 1,500. Do you know how hot that is? Now ask yourself, why is it some black people are conditioning their minds that, oh, because I'm black, I can't stay out in the sun is too hot, it bothers me. That's a certain mindset that was instilled in them, and when they start thinking that the sun is bad for them and the sun is hot, it actually does become bad for them, and it is making them feel hot, it is making them feel uncomfortable, because those thoughts are triggered and registered into the brain, which simulates that all throughout the DNA, and it can also make an imbalancement in the white and red blood cells, and it breaks down the immune system, and it opens up you to sickness and illness.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. Does the sun and the moon, could you have one without the other, and having the sun and the moon, does that deal with balance?
That's my son, by the way. I'm sorry, I missed that. I missed the whole. I heard sun, moon. Go ahead, say it again. My mind was like I saw you, but like I was over there. Go ahead, say it again. The sun.
Now, I wanted to say the sun and the moon, you have one without the other, and having the sun and the moon, does that deal with balance?
Now you're talking about physically. Can you have the sun and the moon one without the other?
Physically and mentally.
All right, physically, you gotta research this. The moon is an illusion. It's actually the manifestation of a satellite. It's not real. Okay. Now you must say, well, I've read about the moon breaking off from the earth. Well, that's in the Sumerian stories. That's a theory. Now, mentally and spiritually, when it represents energies, no, because when you get back into Egypt, the forces, the energy of the moon and the sun have different representations from a spiritual aspect. One is feminine, one is masculine. Contrary to belief, the sun is not the masculine energy. Like for an example, the 5% Nation teaches that the sun represents the man and the moon represents the woman. That's reverse. It's actually the sun is a representation of the woman or the womb, and the moon is representation of the man. When you go back into the mysteries of Tahuti, Tahuti's symbol is the baboon and the moon. And he ruled under the rulership of the moon forces, or the moon cycle. Whereas feminine forces rule the planet under the sun cycle. So from a spiritual aspect, we are now in the sun cycle. And the reason why there's so much unrest on the planet right now is because men are still trying to rule when it's time for females to rule, and they're not stepping back and letting women take their rightful place. This is why you're going to see more chaos take place, because they don't want to give up the rulership and reign, because this is a planet that's controlled right now by feminine energy. And now you have an adverse energy trying to rule and reign on the planet. So it's creating conflict. So, go ahead.
Okay, just because it kind of bogged me a little bit. You said the moon is an illusion?
The moon is a satellite. Okay? It's not an actual planet. Now, I don't want to get too far into that, because first of all, we know they never walked on the moon. Let's establish that. There's other theories that the moon was part of our planet and it broke off.
Right, I heard that.
When you read the story of Nubia, but that can't factually be explained. Now, why I say the moon is a self-roving satellite planet that was created, it's actually an illusion. Now,
I have a DVD with that with Phil Valentine.
Phil Valentine talks about it. Dr. Blair.
Satellite, yeah.
Right. Dr. Blair talks about it too. There's another good. It's actually something that was self-created, like a biosphere or a colony.
Right.
Do you understand? So I'm not saying it's not there. It's there. You're seeing it. When you see it in the sky, when it's out, you're seeing it. But what I am saying is, it's not as it's been taught to us through science per se and through the educational system. That's not the correct.
But it has a big effect on the Earth, right?
Yes, because that satellite that they created, it does have an effect on the gravitational pull and the energy grid of the planet, because it houses energy, for sure. But what I am saying is, it's not what we think it is.
Okay.
You understand? Because I've had people ask us, well, I read in the, when the Nibiru veered off its orbit, and the Zachariah Stitchin stories, or the Dr. York stories, and the Nubian information, but that's faith-based information that really you can't, it's not 100% fact. These are how they related the stories of how these things got there. They're not all that stuff's not factual. But
I have a question. How do you perceive spiritual warfare? Because that was my question coming up with righteousness and unrighteousness. How is the spiritual warfare?
Again, using the word spiritual and perceive, this is my own personal answer. Let's establish that. You may not agree with what I'm about to say. Yeah, all right, I got to say that though. Okay.
All right.
You're constantly at war 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
The very fact there's an internal war that goes on in your body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every time you exercise your will, you're fighting a spiritual war. Every time you make a decision to eat something or not eat something, you're fighting a spiritual war. Every time you make the decision to go somewhere or not go somewhere, you're fighting a spiritual war. I'll show you what I'm getting at. Every time you make the decision to spend an X amount of money, there's an internal battle that's going on in the mind, because the subconscious and the conscious are wrestling. All the neurons, electrons, the cerebellum, all the functions of the brain are at war, trying to come to a conclusion in your mind of what decision to make. You're at war constantly when you're ingesting information, because it can have an effect on you, good or bad. Alright? For an example, if I read a book on magic, and I might not be educated enough on how to do certain ancestral magic, and I go try something, and maybe I'm not doing it the correct way, I can open myself up to certain energies that my subconscious may not be prepared for. And this can open people up to walk-ins, hearing voices, because what they've done is they've opened up a porthole or dimension to the spiritual world, and now they're being attacked psychically, or in their psyche, by spiritual beings that they may not have been ready for. Whereas opposed to, say, somebody advanced in their studies, their information and their knowledge, and has done the research, and is maybe looking at doing a magic ritual or ancestral ritual, and they're able to open up that porthole, that dimension, and receive an influx of powerful energy that has a positive effect on their life, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. Alright, so this is how I term warfare. It works on all levels. We deal with this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the moment we get up to the moment we walk to our closet and decide what I want to put on today, how I want to dress, to the very decision of running my business. Do I want to go to work today? You're constantly in a spiritual war, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when I'm saying war, I don't want you to think chaos, confusion, and fighting. War is just a term, in my definition, of making constant decisions. You're constantly at war with yourself. Go ahead.
So yeah, and all of that, the TV, music, radio is always aiding most of that one side.
It would be aiding part of that spiritual warfare.
Right.
Correct. Because part of that spiritual warfare is what they're trying to do to attack us mentally right now in the news with all these police shootings. They're trying to incite a certain reaction in us. All right. Like I said, you saw this motorcycle biker shooting in Texas a couple weeks ago. Those police were handling that like they were at a social meeting. If you go pull up the footage, you'll see these bikers sitting behind the police line. They're all hanging out, talking, texting on their phone. The police's back turned to them, right? That's an image they're trying to project. Then when you go look at the Baltimore riots, you got the National Guard there. They're in riot gear. They're projecting another image. What are they trying to do? What statement are they trying to make? What visual thought are they trying to put in our minds? Whereas majority of those biker gangs were Caucasian and white, they handled that where there was a mass murder. A bunch of people died, and over 200 people got seriously injured. And they're handling this like it's another walk in the park. You see footage of the police officers talking and giggling and laughing with the bikers. The bikers are sitting down, chatting, texting on their phones. But in Baltimore, as soon as they had a peaceful protest, man, they put on riot gear. They called in the National Guard. They're bringing the staple. That's a part of working on your psyche, spiritual, mental warfare. It's more mental. But the mental and the spiritual have a connection. So all of these things connect into that concept. This is just my perception of it. Spiritual warfare. So when somebody is looking at, that's why I said, we're in the fourth dimension now as we speak. If you don't believe that, then you're not there yet, and you just got to do more work. We're at fourth dimension now. Don't let nobody shake you that we're not there yet. We're getting there. This is why you're here. For an example, Dr. Blair said we're going from the third dimension right now to the fifth dimension, because we're in the fourth now. Those that have raised themselves up have access to the fourth dimension. They see outside of person, place, and thing. They're dealing with quantum right now. So we would be, for lack of a better word, we have now access through the spiritual realm by way of our meditations, by way of our ancestral connection, by those connected to us who we've reached out through in our DNA, and they now have opened up the porthole of the dimension, and we're now able to go through at will. This is a reality to those that have raised themselves up to it. Now, if you're listening to this, whether it's on the show or you're listening to it here, and you may not have raised yourself up to that experience, then it just hasn't happened for you yet. Doesn't mean it's not real. It just means it hasn't happened for you yet. And again, I can only speak from my own personal experiences. But you want to say something else?
No.
Okay. All right. What time we got? We'll go another 25 minutes. Everybody following so far, right? And again, I think this level of knowledge is the missing link that we're lacking. Because, like I said, and what we read here, and I'm going to go to the next paragraph.
What's bothering me right now, I'm trying to get out, right, is that it's like saying that melanated people, to me, they would be the one who should be ruling.
Correct.
Rather than other people that's ruling. So all the other people that's ruling have that power. That's why I bring in the spiritual.
All right, but you're right. But remember this, though, and I'm going to use...
It couldn't be just a physical...
Dr. Bynum explains this. That's an excellent point. Dr. Bynum explains this. Dr. Jewel Pooper, I'm just talking about this Thursday night. And it's in this book here, actually, what you just asked. Remember, neuromelanin. You could take an Asian, you could take an African, you could take a Latino. Their levels of how they can create the abundance of neuromelanin doesn't vary. Understand that. Now, physically it varies, yes. When dealing with the neuromelanin, that level is going to vary from somebody that's dark-skinned to light-skinned. That's obvious. That's not what she was talking about. That's not what he's talking about. Now, your answer was, why are people ruling the planet that might be beings that are less melanated?
Right.
That's because the ones that are highly melanated have been worked on. they've been given the wrong information and they have not been taught, as it explains here, to use the power of their brain. Because you hear this term, what percentage of the brain do they say that we actually use? 10, right?
Yeah.
These people, the same systems of indoctrination that they're teaching the masses, they don't follow.
Right.
So those systems are for people that fall for it. For an example, the higher-ups that control the natural resources, control countries, the gold, the mineral, these are the same people that are teaching systems of indoctrination such as religion, educational systems. This is meant for the masses that are asleep, so we fall for this stuff. So now we have a different level of consciousness. You have the individual here that, like I said, is part of the experiment, and then you have the people up here that are ruling. They're the ones controlling the experiment. So this is why I said, when you have, I just had a nice discussion with a bunch of brothers online. It was Sarah Sutansetti, you know, these cats. They all talking revolution. So my thing is, what resources do you have for this revolution? So what do you mean? What do you mean? All right, if I come to you, I'm like, Yahuda, we need revolution. We need to go out there, fight this war, get some guns. That's not reality. Let me tell you what. I watched last night, and who saw the movie Selma? Anybody watch it yet?
Yeah.
All right, I rented it last night. My wife wanted to get it. I'm not a big fan of that because I was surprised. The movie really wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like Oprah Winfrey, to me, she does that mammy and pappy shit. I'm not a fan of it. It's that I feel like it's also, there's a concentrated effort to focus, like the only part of history deals with the civil rights movement. And it's not to downplay, because to watch what those people went through is horrific. And they did, I mean, some of us wouldn't even be where we are today if it wasn't for that. But I feel like there's an injustice done. It's always portrayed in this passive way. I don't like it. It bothers me. So we always get into debates when we watch it. Like, I can't watch Color Purple. I can't watch stuff like that. I think it's an indoctrinated way to tell the story. It's just my perception of it. But I watched this movie. There was a lot of powerful things in it. If you're not paying attention, you won't catch it. The scene that stood out to me the most, and I'm bringing this up because it ties into what we're talking about now. There was a scene where after one of the marches, because you saw the first couple of marches, they were attacked, right? Dealing with Selma when they crossed the bridge. So there's a scene where the one guy goes, man, that's it. I'm tired of this march and stuff, this peaceful protest. We need to get some guns. We need to tally up and attack them. So the guy responds to him. He says, what are you going to attack them with? A couple of your rifles, your 32. You take out one or two of them. Then you give them an excuse to take out 400 or 500 of us. Think about that statement for a minute. And then he goes on to say, the guy got religious. Now, this was a reverend in the movie. I think it was Ralph Abernathy. So then he goes to him, he goes, well, the Bible says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He says, man, this ain't got nothing to do with religion or the Bible. So you miss that stuff if you're not paying attention. This was a reverend saying to this guy, religion and the Bible has nothing to do with this. This is not a war that has to be fought like that. It's a war that's got to be fought with this. And the key thing that stood out to me, now it doesn't mean be passive. I believe in all means. If you're being attacked physically, by all means, at that point, you got to protect yourself. So I'm not saying turn the other cheek, be passive. I am saying, if we were to fight a war, and we got some crazy dude amongst us that's not educated mentally, do you want to give this dude a Uzi?
That's the whole thing. I think the wisdom part.
There you go. What you said earlier, the wisdom and the knowledge aspect. I'm not going to put a semi-automatic weapon into some crazy dude's hand, because if he's not educated and he's not taught emotionally, physically, and spiritually, that gun might turn around and that might be used against us. Do you understand? So this is the whole point. That's not the solution. I do believe, like Dr. Jewel and Dr. Bruce are saying, Edward Bruce Bynum, it starts here mentally. If we master this, everything else is going to fall into place. The problem where the separation is we have some that are so caught up in the fanatical aspect of the revolution part of it. And we need that part. I'm not saying we don't. I believe we should be training for that part. I do believe there is going to be a time, or there will be times, where somebody will have to defend themselves. So I do believe we can have systems in place where we can train and practice these techniques, but they have to be done at the right time. Because if we were, say, right now here in Dade County, we got everybody together and say, man, we're tired of this shit. And say we rounded up rifles and guns. We just gave them an excuse to come with tanks and missiles and tear gas we're not prepared to fight that war. That's a reality. So my question to these brothers was, you're saying that you're a revolutionary. I say they're illusionaries. There's a difference. I like the concept. I'm sure there's a lot of people fed up, but like we were talking about last week, when the pineal gland is calcified, you become reactive and not proactive. I have now matured and realized there's a different way to approach this. Because those that knew me 7, 8, 9 years ago, and you knew me when I was young, I'd stand out in these streets till the sun came up and argue with somebody. Like I met him back in, what year did I first meet you, 1990?
Yeah.
And I was a crazy ass Muslim, peddling, wearing a white jalabia robe, come from New York, and I'm walking around, I'm going into Carroll City with Shia and Kush, and I'm walking into drug-infested neighborhoods where right when you walk in, there's dudes guarding the front with semi-automatic weapons, and we're going in to talk to the drug dealers, and we're going in to educate and talk to them. We're going into some of the worst areas and neighborhoods that you can possibly dream of. But you know why we never felt the fear? Because the energy that we were giving off, there was a certain respect on both sides. I mean, these dudes would say, hey, go ahead, man, come on in. Because they knew what it represented. Now, what I'm saying is, if that can have an effect on somebody that's so aggressive and is carrying a semi-automatic weapon, and that at the blink of an eye would kill you, what thought triggered in their mind when they saw something that represented different mental energy where they didn't feel threatened?
Right, they didn't feel threatened.
Now, they let us in. We saw everything that they were doing. Everything was illegal. But that's not why we were there. So I do believe you can reach people on that level first. Because now some of those people that we knew back then that were carrying weapons and selling dope, them people ain't doing that no more. Now some are. Some have got lost, some have got shot, some have got killed. But there's the ones that have now seen the bigger picture. Because look, that lifestyle or that mentality is only going to get you one thing. You're either going to be in jail or you're going to end up dead. That's it. That's your alternative. There's no, until we shift the paradigm, we can be in control, like you said. Why are less melanated people ruling the planet? Their biggest fear is us educating ourselves and using the power of our minds. Then things are going to change. It's going to naturally happen, not in no spooky way. It's going to naturally and gradually happen. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. Then when we're in the positions where we make the laws, we make the decisions, things change. Now again, I got to go back to summer to show you that that process works. And again, I had to look at the civil rights movement from a metaphysical aspect, because I got caught up in the physical of it. Because I used to get disgusted the way they portrayed it, because it made people look docile and weak, and that bothered me. You know, turn the other cheek shit. Because I used to be the dude like, no, screw that. I want to be the dude to get a gun and start blasting people. That's how I used to think. Think about this, Martin Luther King, right? Think about the balls that he had and what he did. I don't think any of us really. You could say now, I would do that. I don't think he would have did that shit. I can't even say if I would have done that. Think about how he put himself in harm's way. And how he approached things. And how, just by the simple approach, how he was able to get Lyndon B. Johnson to pass that bill for people to vote.
You know, that's the thing. I always try to put myself in some of these characters' position.
I don't think we would have been able to do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it, not necessarily because of myself, but because of my family. Like, because I know a lot of times how they think, and you know, it's not only me going through that.
Right.
There will be a lot, you know, my relatives or whoever associated with me that will have the worst.
Right.
And then that'll be tough.
Well, but again, think about the harm's way that those individuals, the dangerous situation they put themselves in.
Right.
And at a time that was highly volatile, not like now.
Yeah.
Because think about it, we're living in a time now where things are more easygoing. Now, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. Of course, racism does exist. And you got to be an idiot to think it doesn't. So I'm not saying come out here into the world and think everything is... No, we know this exists. It'll always exist. It'll always be around as long as there's different ethnicities and races. But what I am saying, when I watched that movie last night, what it brought me to the realization was they did some stuff in dangerous times. Now, I also recognized later on all the other different races and religions that joined in, and that made it more of a danger on a global level. Because then when white folks joined those marches, and you had pastors and priests, you had nuns, you had people from the Greek Orthodox Church, you had people from all over, that's when he became a threat. Because think about it, the attacks lessened when more white people got involved in those marches. Because now it was becoming more of a worldwide event. But when it was just black folks and nobody cared, they were getting beat up. So you got, what I'm saying is, I'm just using that movie. This is breaking things that you got to look at things, look at the big picture. You understand? It's not just always from the physical side of things. You got to look at this from the spiritual side of things too, from the mental side of things, because each has its own breakdown. And like I said, there was some powerful moments watching that film, but I caught some other little things that maybe if you're watching it you wouldn't catch. But to me, that was the most profound part of the film, when the Reverend tells that dude, this has got nothing to do with religion or the Bible, when he made the statement to him, man, the Bible says an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And dude said, man, this ain't got nothing to do with religion or the Bible. That's what he said to him. I said, wow, I guarantee you that went over everybody's head. Because everybody's caught up in Dr. King, Reverend Dr. King, Southern Christian leadership movement. So everybody's caught up into the religious aspect of it. But powers that be know they throw that stuff in there for a reason. Alright, got about 10 more minutes. Probably going to stop this a little bit early. Any questions? I want to get through one more part of this. Anybody got any questions? Comments? Alright, so let's go through a little more of this. Alright, and it goes on to say, spiritual discipline flows from this realization. An unshakable conviction flowers in this life. Do not confuse or limit existence and reality with its expressions in matter, space, and time. That's where we left off. Reality, like matter itself, is ultimately trans-temporal, meaning temporary, and trans-spatial, meaning it only goes or translates temporarily and only through a certain level of space and time. Even though the physical forces of nature may seem separate, they are truly unified in higher dimensional space. Yes, both science and intuition acknowledge that we are embedded in a higher dimensional space. Our dense physical bodies and the common objects of our everyday world occupy only the 3 dimensions of height, breadth, and width. Time is another component in the equation, and for a century we have known that space and time are themselves merged in the 4th dimension of space and time. Light itself now appears more and more to us as a vibration of a 5th dimension. Surrounding and infusing our bodies while we live in these 3 physically experienced dimensions in space-time is a subtler informational field of the body that seems to have a holographic structure of light and perhaps dark matter. Now, what also another definition that Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum uses for for melanin, is trapped matter. Brother Panic refers to it as chaos in the blood. Now, this is many different terms. And the manifestation of it, as Dr. Jewell says, is the manifestation of the electromagnetic spectrum. That's powerful. When you look at it in that, if we see that melanin is the reason why we attract any type of energy, whether you want to term it positive, negative, whatever, you're attracting that based on the manifestation of your melanin. Melanin is the key to everything that exists in the universe. There's no getting around it. They've done millions and billions of dollars on the research and the study of melanin to understand the very existence of our consciousness and why we exist physically. That's how powerful it is. And that's why I believe a term we should start using for ourselves to get that word out there is melanated people. Because that ties you into a whole another level of consciousness. Because people hear you say that, they're going to stop in their tracks and say, what? What'd you say? See, nobody cares if you say African. That's become cliche, right? Nobody cares if you say ancient Egyptian. It's like, yeah, alright, man. Nobody cares if you say Muslim. Nobody cares if you say Black Hebrew Israelite. Nobody cares. Because these are terms that people have defined and they feel comfortable with. So it's okay to call yourself those things. I like to say this, like when I get into conversations with people, what's your religion? Why do they always got to be a religion? What's your religion? What do you believe? I said, I don't believe in anything and I don't have a religion. Well, I don't. Do you believe in God? I believe in God consciousness. So when I said, do you believe in God? Well, believe in God See, when people are asking you that, they're really asking you, do you believe in God the way I believe in God? I don't know why they don't ask the question like that. Stop asking me if I believe in God. What you really want to ask me is, do I believe in God the way you believe in God? So that's why I say, well, when you say believe in God, how do you mean? Like, do you believe in God? And then they go, well, yeah, I'm Christian. No, I don't believe in God at all on that level. Or they'll go, yeah, I'm Muslim. No, I don't believe in God. I believe when you take it back on a metaphysical level, there's a God consciousness. There's a cosmic or a mental consciousness that permeates throughout the universe, and I believe we all have the ability to tap into that consciousness. That I believe in, if you want to use that word. But when you ask the question, do I believe in it on the way you believe in it, if you're a Muslim, Christian, a Jew, or whatever, no. So when people ask those questions, we need to ask that question back. So then they say, well, then what are you? You don't have a religion? No, I just told you, I don't believe in religion. Well, what are you? I'm a spiritually conscious person. See, now they're like, oh, they don't know what to make of that.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I don't think themselves they know what they're saying when they say that.
Right.
That's why sometimes, yeah, I do the same thing. I ask the same question, like, well, oh, you did, so why do you say that? Like, and then that's when they start, like, they take a seat back. It's like, well, where are we going with this? What are you talking about?
Well, that's when you got to recognize at this point, to me, in our conscious evolution, if you're dealing with somebody like that, if they're religious and they want to hold an intelligent conversation and they're receptive, by all means, engage. But if you're getting that ignorant fool that wants to debate and fight you, it's not worth it. Shut it down, because like I said earlier, you can sit there and talk to them for 2-3 hours. They're not interested really in what you got to say. They're interested in staying there with you in hopes that they can convert you. And what's going to happen is after you drain yourself, they're going to walk away from that conversation with the same mindset, and you didn't accomplish anything. Now, if it's, I've encountered that religious person that's a real sincere seeker of the truth, and they just really just don't know. And then you might say something to them that awakens something in them, and they're like, wow, and then now you're seeing a different reaction. That's the person you want to spend some time with.
Yeah.
That's the person you want to dialogue with.
Well, you know how I try, because they always say, well, God, you have to pray to God, and saying this and that, and we're like, well, do you consider yourself a child of God? And most of the time they say yes. So and then, okay, give me a description of what an ancestor is. And then they go back and they say, well, ancestor is those that were there before that related to you. Or if you're a child of God, then God is supposed to be your ancestor.
Right.
Then they start looking at it a little, at a different angle, and they start thinking a little different. Not to say that guides them exactly to where they need to be,
right?
But I felt it was a start. You see what I'm
saying? Right, and that's fine. But I found, like, if you're doing that and then they're leaving that and going to this whole, I find, if it's that person, I'm not saying you might do that to a person and that might open them up.
Right. Sometimes.
But you'll get that person where for an example, you'll open them up with something you just said, and then they'll get into this, they'll go into left field and all this whole Jesus spiel. That's when you got to shut it down. Like, listen, time out. Like, let me give you an example. 2 shows ago, not this past Thursday when I had Dr. Jewel on, I had a sister on 2 weeks ago. Her name is Vera Courtney. She's a young sister. She just wrote a book. So I bring her on the show, and now this is a show that I do. Now she's a little bit more passive. She's pleasant with everybody, but there's one thing I don't tolerate on the show. I make it clear in the beginning, this is not a religious show, so don't call in with the religious crap. If you want to go talk Christianity, find a Christian radio talk show. That's where you deal with that. I make that clear from the beginning so everybody knows where we stand. Well, this sister Vera Courtney, if you Google her, she wrote a book. It's called Unmasking the Magicians. The Time and What I Know Unmasking the Magicians. She used to be a Jehovah's Witness, then she was a Black Hebrew Israelite. And now she's none of those things. She came to the realization of a higher level of spiritual consciousness, so she started writing books. I stumbled across her on the internet. I contacted her. All right, we started talking, and I bring her on the show. Well, when she does radio appearances, she has a lot of these ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that like to follow her and try to convert her back.
Oh, wow.
All right, so I had her on the show. You can listen to this. What I'm about to tell you is archived. You can go on to my radio show, and you can listen to the archive. So I see this one caller in the caller queue. I forgot where she was calling from. And on the internet radio show, you could call live, or you could just listen live on the internet. You know, you've been on there, or you could go through the chat. So this one that was on both, and she kept sending me through the internet. Oh, plug me in. I'm the one calling from wherever. I think it was Dallas. I said, all right, I'm going down the queue. You're next. There's like 2 of you. So I typed back, all right, I got you in the call queue. You're probably 1 or 2 calls down. So I get her on the phone. So she gets on the phone. Oh, how you doing, Vera? So I immediately recognize that the sister knows her. Okay.
Oh boy.
So I'm like, no, it was cool. I'll give everybody a chance to speak, but it got stupid, and I had to shut it down. So she starts talking about, you know, I love you, sister, and I like all that you're doing, but you need to come back home. What you're doing is wrong. I'm like, wait a minute, whoa, what are we talking about here? She starts getting into this whole Esau thing, and Jesus walked on water. I said, whoa, time out. I said, can I ask you a question? Stop. I was like, you're rambling on. You're not making any sense. First of all, you're throwing out all these terms. And I did this just to show most people don't know what they're talking about. I said, what does the word Esau mean? Oh, what does it matter what Esau means? That's irrelevant. I'm just trying to show you that the lineage of Jesus, and then Jesus walked on water, blah, blah, blah. I said, look, you're babbling. I was like, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So I just cut her off. I blocked her, cut the phone off, I blocked her from the chat. So the sister explained to me, oh, this is a sister that follows me everywhere. She's trying to get me to come back. Well, my whole outtake on that is, it's a waste of time and energy. Now, I wouldn't even entertain her, because if I sat there, I could have went in on her. We could have argued back and forth for 30 minutes, but at the end of the day, what is it going to prove? So my message to her simply was, look, if you want to convert people to Jesus, find a Christian radio show where you're in the same likes of your own, and you can talk about Jesus all night till the sun comes up. That's not what we do here. I'm just using that. That's how we got to start approaching things, because that takes from us. That takes from you, and it drains you, and you have to revitalize yourself. How many times have you gotten into a debate with somebody and you felt drained? You know you have, because it's taken something from you mentally. They know that, so they want to engage you in idiotic debates over religion and nonsense. Who cares? At the end of the day, who cares? You just say, okay, you can have that. You understand? All right, I'm gonna read this last thing, and then we're gonna shut it down. I want to read that last statement before I finish this last page. It says, light itself now appears more and more to us as a vibration of the 5th dimension, surrounding and infusing our bodies while we live in these 3 physically experienced dimensions and space-time, in a subtler informational field of the body that seems to have a holographic structure of light and perhaps dark matter. The wavelengths of this holographic body carry information that literally informs our vibrationally lower dense physical bodies. They interpenetrate each other. This may be a revelation to modern science, but it is an axiom of perennial sciences. Just as we are embedded in multiple dimensions beyond those we can see, touch, or smell, as currently positioned in physics by different versions of string theory and Holloman, our consciousness is projected into and embedded in multiple dimensions. You know you can project consciousness out into the universe. This is another science they don't want us to do. Now, by our meditations and visualizations, we can affect the planet by the consciousness we project out into space and time. So your meditation periods can be super powerful if you send energy out to the planet and send it out to people, to nature. I mean, there's not one level, but consciousness as a whole can be projected not out just onto the planet Earth, out into the universe. This is the power of the melanated mind. Now, this is what they don't want us to know. Or I don't want to say don't want us to know, because I believe now in this day and time, the age we live in, nothing is a secret anymore.
Is it because it would affect the balancement?
Big time, in a good way. It would shift the grid of the planet, because remember, the 2012 pole shift was a shift in the magnetic grid in consciousness. That's what that represented. We bring that shift in consciousness. That was brought on by us. That happened because of us. The more we evolve and change spiritually and mentally, we affect everything in the universe. We affect nature. We affect the planet we live on. We affect consciousness as a whole, and consciousness individually. That's the power of it. They know this, so they have to keep implementing systems of indoctrination, such as religion, their educational systems, etc., to keep us closed-minded to this stuff. Now, like I was saying a second ago, I believe in this day and time, in this age, this spiritual era that we live in now like no other, there's no excuse. I don't believe there's any secrets anymore. I believe we all have access to any level of information we want. We just have to open ourselves up to receive it. That's it. There's no secret. It's only a secret if you don't want to take the time to study, research, and learn. That's why I feel, and this is just me, I went through all those things, the Masonic Lodge. I don't feel that's necessary anymore. It's just me. I went through different systems of Yoruba, been initiated to that. It served a purpose for that time. I believe at that time I had to be initiated under Oshun for a reason. I had to do that for a reason because there was a certain journey at that point in my life for that particular spirituality. But I believe that got me to here. And I believe now that when it's all said and done, all you need is this and this. I don't need any of that stuff no more. I believe that's all physical things. I believe once you rid yourself of all the external things, the sky's the limit. That's basically the point I'm trying to get at. All you need is your meditations, your affirmations to your ancestors, and to me, that's it. That's me. I'm sure there's plenty of other people that agree with that, and there may be plenty of people that don't because they may be on a different path right now. But that's what I believe this is about. And that's why I wanted to touch on information from Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum and Dr. Jewel Pookrum, because I also believe, based on my research, that these are two key teachers that are tapping on a certain level of information that I think in this day and time we're in dire need of big time. Because they're going from a purely mental, conscious, metaphysical aspect of things, and they're certified in their fields. These are not just people that have the title doctor because it sounds good. I mean, everybody knows the history of Dr. Jewel Pookrum. She's a certified PhD. So is Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum. So these are people that have the experience in the main field or mainstream, and they have a highly, I mean, man, let me tell you something. When you read his book and you talk to him, I mean, this dude's book will blow you away. He's written about 10 books, and why he doesn't get, in my estimation, the attention is because he's not just talking about blaming the white man for all your problems. He breaks it down in his book. He talks about this is deeper than that. Now, he's not negating African history, but he's saying that in itself, when you hear me say that, I'm getting a lot of that information from his stuff. And this is a dark-skinned, melanated black man teaching this. And he's clearly saying that that in itself can be a trap because it creates something that can work against your melanin and your DNA when you just use that. It doesn't mean, we know the history of what the Caucasian has done. That's a fact. We see the atrocities. We know everywhere he goes, he's a killer by nature. He goes into every country, rapes, robs, and natural resources. But what he is saying is, there's a certain mind state we put ourselves in to allow that to happen, is what he's saying. And we can change that by tapping into the pure brain melanin power. And there's nothing they can do about it if we tap into the divinity of that. Nobody can stop it. That would change what you said, why the lesser are ruling when the gods and the goddesses should be ruling the planet. That's the solution to the problem. Now it's easier said than done, though. I know it sounds, well, you said it like that, it sounds easy. It's not easy.
But,
I'm going to stop there, but go ahead.
that power that these people have, weren't they creating thing that is impossible to be possible?
Say it again. The
Uh,
lesser that's ruling?
I'll try to put it away. So
Maybe I didn't get that.
Yeah.
I might have lost you on that one.
For example, right?
Yep.
Things that in our modern time that we call creation, then, like they want to create,
Right.
it was one time impossible, but today it become possible.
Right.
Right? So I'm saying why we are not doing that since we have that power.
I got you.
For example, the phone that you have.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? 10, 20 years, that was impossible.
Wasn't impossible, we just weren't aware of it. Correct. I
Right,
got what you're saying.
yeah.
I got
When you tell
yeah.
somebody, oh, you have a phone that you could talk and see picture, we're like, oh no, man.
Right. But remember, it's possible because of this reason.
Mm-hmm.
when knowledge is suppressed from those that don't know, it creates a system of separation. Like, let me give you an example. If I came to you back during a certain time and you were ill, and I was a shaman and I had an herb that you were not conscious of that could heal you, you would look at me in a whole different light.
Right.
You would look at me as a divinity, as some type of God or connected to some type of higher spiritual power. But say as you matured, you started educating yourself and you started to realize this herb grows in a certain region, it's a certain plant, and it's really not that spooky. You just needed to know where the herb was, where the tree was, where it grows, how to prepare it. So now you're like, holy crap, if I would have known that then, I know it now. It eliminates. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Because that was the point I was trying to make. We have to find out how things work.
Exactly. Big time.
And a lot of time we don't know how things work.
We don't know how
things work. Then we could always.
And you want to know? It starts as this simple.
Right.
It starts as this simple. I tell people. People always ask, how can I do this? It's as simple as talking to your ancestors. If you connect with them, you'll be surprised. They will open the porthole and the dimension to consciousness beyond your reality. Okay? I used for an example the monatomic gold. It's just one little tool. If you take that a couple hours before bedtime and don't eat, I like the powder because the powder to me works better for me. It dissolves under my tongue. And before I go to sleep, whatever you want to know, I'm saying this is this simple. If you want to know, like you said, how a phone is created.
Right.
I'm being dead serious. I know this sounds crazy. If you want to know how this phone was put together, you can simply, because remember, every night you go to sleep, you die, and every time you wake up, you're born again. You're literally traveling the spiritual realm every night you sleep. That's a fact. You have different experiences. Now, that's the best time to talk to your ancestors right before you go to sleep. So you say, you know what? I want my guardians to explain to me how this phone was created and built. I guarantee you, when you connect, you will have a dream that night, and you will see a vivid image in detail of how this phone was created. I know it sounds crazy. That's a reality to me because I've done stuff like that and it's worked for me. Now, if you're all jacked up, I'm not saying you can take monatomic gold and your diet is bad, you don't meditate, you're not doing anything spiritual. You're not going to take monatomic gold and go to sleep and have all these magical things happen. It doesn't work like that. What I am saying, the body, the mind, the body, spiritually, mentally, and physically, you have to be doing certain things to condition yourself, to open yourself up, to be receptive to those experiences. So that's just one thing. But in order for that one thing to work, is the word you use, how things work. In order for this to work, something else needs to work. In order for that to work, something else needs to work. You understand? We have to study the laws of the universe and nature and how it operates, because that will dictate how everything works. You understand? That's how this really works. But that's a great term that you use.
So I'm analyzing even the science. Every time you speak, it's well, science. It's a fact because science. But I'm finding out science is also a belief.
On certain levels, I agree with you.
You know, it's like
I do agree with you.
We'll find Lucy, which is 10 million.
Right.
Oh, you know, it's 10 million. Oh, you know, why they're finding.
Well, you're right, because if you got technical, they're saying through.
There's a fact.
Right, they're saying through carbon and fire. I agree. So, but again, you're saying that now because you've raised yourself up to a certain level of consciousness. Now, before you knew, maybe 20 years ago, you may not have said that.
No,
that's what I'm trying to say. Because that shows that your consciousness is evolving, and that's a great thing. That's awesome. Now you're seeing, because that's cool, because I say the same thing. Like you said, I'm not really a stickler on that. Because, like you say, how do you really know? Now, you don't want to play the semantic game, because you could be like, you can say that to anything. How do you know? How do you know?
Right.
You only know when you know. Let me say that again. You only know when you know, and that's when truth becomes a reality for you, when you confirm it, truth for yourself. Not nobody else telling you. So if I come like this and I go, yeah, Yehuda, you know, they found the bones of Lucy 10.5 billion years through carbon and fossil. You go, oh yeah? But if you're accepting just based on what I'm telling you, now then when you go and you sit down, you go start pulling information up, you're talking, and you meditate on it, and you say, wait a minute, I'm not really perceiving it like that. This is how I perceived it, what you just said. That now becomes your reality.
Right.
Whereas that may not be somebody else's reality, but it is your reality. That's all that matters. And that's when truth becomes real. that's when it becomes divine, and that's when your ancestors are working for you. Because once we understand there is no right or wrong, it's just different levels of existence and knowledge and how things work and how things are perceived. That's it. Then we're going to find out things are going to change for us drastically. So that's why I say we got to get out of all the debates. Like you talked about earlier, you go on, and it's not to knock them brothers, but I don't see the purpose of it. House of Consciousness, why are we having these debates with the Black Hebrew Israelites? It's a show. Everybody's screaming at each other, blah, 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 I know this, Egypt this, the Hebrews that. At the end of the day, we should all be coming up with a realistic solution. What are we walking away from? And then they have post-debates. You know how messed up in the head you got to be? You had a debate, and then you want to have a post thing explaining to the people why you feel you won. But in the end, who really won? We didn't gain nothing out of it. It's two black organizations fighting each other.
Exactly. Black people, two individuals.
And you know who's laughing at it? The owners of YouTube. Look at these clowns. That's just like the other guys that are on the internet talking about revolution. Like King Noble. He's funny to me.
Oh, man,
this dude's a character. He's on the internet talking about black power, black revolution, and then begging people for money. And somebody just put him on the spot. Why didn't you show up in Baltimore? Well, I don't have the resources and the money to get to Baltimore. I'm stationed, I do what I do in Atlanta. You know what the person came back at him with? So you say you're not part of the system, but you want to take money from the system from other people that had money from the system, and you see how this semantic shit can continue? You want money from the system to support your revolution. So I'm looking at this like, this is idiotic. You know what I mean? That's not a realistic approach. You sit there and you say, I'm a revolutionary, I want to disconnect from society and everything that has to do with the white man, but you're willing to take money from people that work the job for the white man. How is that any different? You understand? So again, where is your resources? Me, it doesn't matter. If you want to fight a revolution, I don't care where the damn money's coming from, as long as you're utilizing it in the right ways. But what I am saying is, don't set yourself up and make statements like that. Just say you're fighting a revolution. I couldn't care where the money came from, because money is money. If it's what you do with that money. You understand? Now again, let me not say that. I do care where the money comes from. I wouldn't want to take money from murderers, say money that was sold, crack that killed my blood ancestors. I don't want that type of money, because there's an energy that comes with that. I'm just saying, if it comes from somebody that's hardworking, regardless of the way they got it, money's money. But when you make statements as like, I'm disconnected from everything in mainstream society, that's impossible. Not living in the United States of America. You show me anybody that's successful doing that, it'll be a brother like that can't leave the confines of Atlanta, that's begging people for money on a daily basis. That's an oxymoron to me. That's why I say they're not revolutionaries, they're illusionaries. You have an illusion that you're a revolutionary. You're not fighting this battle the right way. It starts first with educating people, and then you can't be on the white man's YouTube telling him what you're going to do to him. How are you going to be on YouTube telling him, I'm going to be banging on the crack? I'm going to be waging war on the white man? Who owns YouTube? If he wanted to shut that down, he'd have shut it down a long time ago. And he's laughing at you. That's why I think it's comical when you watch the Black Hebrew Israelites in the streets of New York telling you what they go. Come on, man. Seriously? This is why I say in some of my new posts and on the show, the day of the conscious pimp is over. It doesn't work no more, man. You know, all those organizations, and I'm saying this, somebody that was an ex-Nubian for over 20 years. I was under that mindset. I believed at one time that there was no truth outside of Dr. York or the Nubians. I believe that. I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to say it now, because I see it now that I've stepped outside of it and realized there's such great teachers as Dr. Blair, Dr. Bynum, Dr. Ben that just passed away, Dr. Jewel Pookrum. I realize now, and Dr. Jewel's been doing it since the 70s. Dr. Blair's been doing it since the 60s. These people have always been around, but when you're in that tunnel vision, for years as a Nubian, I didn't see nothing but Nubians. Dr. York, anything you say, if it doesn't agree with what Dr. York says, you're wrong. That was my mindset for over 20 years. And it's a sickness. That can become a sickness. But, thank God, my DNA ancestors pulled me out of it. And now I've learned, when I've opened myself up to everything in the universe, I respect everybody got something to offer now. I can talk to the Christians. Believe it or not, the Bible can offer you something if you read it the right way. The Quran can offer you something if you read it from a metaphysical perspective, not a literal. Any of these cultures, Buddhism, I mean, one thing I learned going to St. Croix, the mountain Rastas taught me a lot of stuff that when you look at mainstream Rastas in America, it's not the same thing. It's totally different culture. when you look at those that actually live it than those that actually perpetrate it. You can learn something from even when you read Kabbalah. You know, sometimes Kabbalah is passed along as something that's not appropriate, but we know Kabbalah came out from the ancient Egyptian mystery systems. So you can learn a lot from that. See, when you look at everything and put it into perspective, the universe is open to you. But if you just say, oh, I'm just a black Hebrew Israelite, you're done. You just closed off your evolution. You stop right there. Your spiritual DNA is at a standstill until you get out of that idiocy. You understand that? And that goes to anybody that's a Muslim, Christian, Jew, whatever. And I can say that from experience. I was one of those people for 20 years. 20 plus years, I would say. My son was born in that. He was born in the community. He did not come up through any level of religion or Christianity. His mother gave birth to him living inside. I lived in a communal lifestyle for I don't know how many years. He was born living that lifestyle. He grew up around Nubians, the ancestors, Dr. York. That's all he knew until 5 to 7 years ago. That's all he knew. So now I had to go back and re-educate him because it's different for him because he got to struggle now with two aspects of it. But it's my job as a father to correct that. I have to correct that. But he understands it because he got a leadway because he wasn't indoctrinated per se as I was as a kid growing up. Because remember, I'm born and raised Catholic. So I left Catholicism right out of high school and I joined an organization like that at 17 years old. I'm going to be 44 years old June 10th. So I only knew that from the age of 17 to my late 30s, early 40s. That's all I knew. You can tell I ran into him in 1990, came down from New York and helped them build the masjid right here in Opelika, 135th Street. That's my roots here. That's how I got here. That's my connection here. So this is all I knew for years. But then think about the wake-up call I got when I started uncovering things. I started saying, wow, this is not what it is. Now, I'm not saying everything that Dr. York taught is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. There's a lot of good things that he teaches. I uncovered a lot of things that I found were not right. I'm not going to get into personal things. I uncovered a lot of things that are not right about him that I don't agree with, and therefore I can't support that because I'd be a hypocrite and just ignore what I didn't say and still say I'm a Nubian and Dr. York is this and that. That would be hypocritical.
Right, because I'm not going to lie to you. Was it for him, I would have never met you.
Well, okay, so
it wasn't for his community or whatever.
It served a purpose,
right.
And I agree with that. And I don't hold no bitterness because I believe everything that happens for a reason. I don't say that in a spooky sense. I believe all those spiritual experiences were to get you to now. It was the bridge from then to now. But it is what it is. But I do believe when you recognize truth and you ignore it, if I were to see those things that I saw that were not right and just kept ignoring it and pretended like it didn't exist, the only person I'm hurting is myself. So I realized I can't ignore this no more. I got to stop being closed-minded because I saw people I knew for years had a lot to offer, but I was on this Dr. York thing. Oh, Dr. York, you can't tell me nothing. Nubians. No, that's not right. You stole that. Everything was you stole that from us. Think of the sick mindset that is. Anytime something came up, oh, you stole that from the Nubians. Oh, Dr. York told you stole. And now I'm finding out that Dr. York stole a lot of stuff from Dr. Blair. I even have personal conversations. I can tell you exactly where verbatim. Because Dr. Blair was teaching about the Draconians, the Reptilians, years before Dr. York even mentioned it in the 90s. That's a fact. You can go look that up.
It's funny, I met a Moor years ago, 2007, 2008, and he, he was highly, on another level, and he worked because I used to work in the hospital.
Okay.
He was a patient, and I happened to walk in a room, and he started talking, and then for whatever reason, his energy drew me in, and he's the one that really introduced me who or what was a Moor. And then I told him, yeah, a lot of things you're talking about, I kind of got touched on, and I'm still in the beginning from the teaching of Dr. York. And he started laughing. Now he's an older gentleman, and he said at the time, because I didn't know, he said, Dr. York, whatever he got, he never gave credit to anybody. He stole everything he got. What he got, he deserved what he got.
Right.
And I was like, whoa. So I'm like, and it's the first person, I didn't know the man from left to right.
Right.
He's the first person that told me that.
Well, the thing is this, I think a lot of the issues people had with York was for that reason. He used a lot of people's sources and never gave credit to them. And one thing, I've had Dr. Phil Valentine on my show, and I know people have different perceptions on Dr. Phil Valentine, but one thing I'll say about Dr. Valentine, one thing I'll say about Dr. Blair, Dr. Bynum, Dr. David Emotep, who's coming on the show this Thursday, they all credit their sources. They all. You'll hear them talk. If you go listen to the show I did with Phil Valentine, he gave Dr. Ben as one of his groomers, one of his elders. He mentioned several people. Dr. Bobby Hemmett. He mentions a bunch of different people. Now, I know Dr. Valentine, he can come off different ways to different people. To me, I don't care. I mean, he teaches a lot of things I agree with. Do I agree with everything he says? No. But it's not about that. That's not the purpose. And I know he comes off different ways to different people. But the difference between those guys and those women is Dr. York created the illusion like he was the only one teaching this, like he was the only one that knew this stuff. And then when you would bring up to him, and I can tell you this from experience, he would say, oh no, they stole that from me. That's the mindset that they walk around with his students. Oh, they took that from him. And now when I go do the research, I'm like, wait a minute. Nibiru, Draconians, reptilians, extraterrestrials, Dr. Blair was talking about that in the 60s. Dr. York's first books that came out on extraterrestrials, the reptilians, didn't come out to the early to mid-90s. That's when he first started talking about it. Now, Nubians will get into this spooky thing like, oh, no. He was teaching that at the time because we weren't ready. That's all. I call that mind fucking. Don't mind fuck me. I'm sorry. I got to use that term because that's what you're doing. You're running a mind game on me. So they've been taught and conditioned to always have some response to your objection. And I can tell you that because that was me. I would do the same thing. So I'm not saying that from an opinion. I'm saying that from my own personal experience. There's a difference. So you're going to run into that. And that's the difference. Now the thing is, here's where I believe you set yourself up for failure. If you go back and look at a lot of York's teachings and writings, he bashed every great organization. He talked about Farrakhan. He talked about Yahweh Ben Yahweh, and he wound up ending up like Yahweh Ben Yahweh. He talked about all these other organizations. You know that old saying, you can't burn a bridge because then you can't cross back over it. This is why now, who's going to come to your aid and assist you and support you? When it's not about the doctrine or the religion. I don't agree with any of that stuff, Nation Islam. But the thing is, there's a certain way to go about it. Now that you've dogged all them out, who's going to come to your aid? What black organization is going to come to your aid and assist you?
I think that's our biggest problem.
Nobody.
We don't support each other at all.
But we have to learn to do that regardless. We don't have to agree with everything that we do.
Right.
We get caught up in the dogma and not the big picture. The big picture, we're trying to raise people up, period. So I can work with, I have a lot of friends that are 5% nation people. Now we know, I could tear that apart in 30 minutes. But when I deal with them, some of these guys I went to high school with, and to this day they're still 5%ers. I go back to New York, they're still 5%ers to this very day. But I'm not going to sit there, but I see some of the positive things they're doing in the community. I see some of the positive things with the law school and mathematics. If it's a place where children can go to be educated and they're off the street and they're not getting caught up in gang violence, regardless of what I teach, I don't care. That's positive. We can support that. Just because, what am I going to say? Oh, they're 5%ers. I'm not down with that. You must be evil if you're not down with trying to help the child get his life together, regardless. I don't care if they don't agree with your ideology, but this is a group of people helping young kids stay out of trouble. We all should be for that, period.
At the end of this, the universe.
It's the universe, baby. That's what it's all about. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I think we touched on a lot. Real quick, just to remind you guys, and I'm going to say it for the show for those listening.
I just think one of the psychology with Dr. York is that don't follow me, check it out. And
right.
you're not going to check it out.
And then when you do, but you know why he says that? Yeah. So you don't check it out.
I know.
Because think about this: if I sit there and bash every reference, you're not going to want to check it out because I just bashed everything. I said blah 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 this, they stole it from that, they took it from this. Don't believe me, check it out. You can be like, man, I'm not going to waste my time. I was that guy. And then when I started going to look, I'm like, wait a minute, shit, he was telling me not to check out. That's the shit I should have been checking out. That's what I mean when I say it's a mind fuck. That's what's called playing with your mind. Now here's the thing. You want to know where? You want to know where he got a lot of those tactics? You're not going to believe me when I say this. Go research Aleister Crowley. Go research wizardry.
Yeah,
The greatest thing a wizard does when he
Yeah.
casts a spell,
Mhm.
the same spell he's trying to take you out of is the same spell he's putting you in. Let me give you an example. We were taught that we were taken out of the spell of religion, that religion is the faith and belief system. You need to come out of that system of faith, spookism, and belief and come into right knowledge, right wisdom, right understanding. This sounds heavy, right? Sounds nice, like, oh, that's good. Now look at the psychological makeup of the whole organization. Watch this real quick. In religion, there's a prophet or a god. It could be Jesus, Moses. There's always a man figure. There's a scripture. If it's Muhammad, it's the Quran. If it's the Bible, whatever. It's Moses. If it's the New Testament, it's Jesus. There's a man figure to worship. There's a book and a scripture, and there's rules and regulations. We could all agree on that, right? That's in Islam, Christianity, Judaism. That's a fact. Let's go to all these organizations now. They use the same tactics. They claim they're taking you out of religion, but they took you out of one religion and put you in another and just sprinkled Afrocentricity over it. Watch. I'll use Dr. York Farrakhan Yahweh bin Yahweh. Watch this. When it was Dr. York under the Answer Rule Law School of Islam, he was ill-cooked, Yanun. We used the Quran was our book that we guided our everyday life, rules, regulations. We followed the dietary laws, etc. It taught us how to dress, how to pray, etc. That was under the school of Islam, correct? You can attest to this. Then we left that and went to the school of Judaism. Then he was an incarnation of Melchizedek. And he's always the highest incarnation in those cultures. You got to pay attention to that psychological mindfuck. He's always the highest. In every one of those schools of thought, he makes himself the highest spiritual incarnation. So now in the school of Hebrewism, he is an incarnation of Melchizedek, or Malachi Zadok. Right? And now we are strict Hebrews. We're wearing the chemises, and we're wearing the tassels, we're wearing the sashes, and now we're heavy into the Torah. We got a book with rules and regulations. We got a man over it under the guise of Malachi Zadok. Same shit. Alright, now that hustle gets tired. Now, alright, that's played out now. People are starting to see through that. Now, we are now dealing with right knowledge and the Anunnaki. So, forget all religion. We're dealing with Anu, and now he's an incarnation of Marduk. See the game? Now he's the spiritual incarnation of Marduk, Anu, Enlil, Enki, the whole. Now we're dealing with that whole school. All right, now this is getting tired. This hustle, people are starting to see through it. Now we're going to deal with Egyptology, and now he's an incarnation of Amenubi Ra-Akata, or Ra, one of the highest incarnations in the Egyptian deities. See the game? So every school of thought you go to, he's the highest incarnation. There's no way you can turn where he's not. But I'm going to tell you what field he can dominate is dealing with ancestral worship. Because that's past Mount Diego. He never messed with that. There's a reason, because you can't control that. Because you can't be the block of the connection between me and my blood ancestors. You can't tell me how to do that. Only I can tell me how to do that. So he never messed with that. And there was a reason why he never messed with it. So then he left that, and now, going through all that, in between, he opened up a Masonic lodge. Then he went from that to being a Baptist Christian minister, and now it goes into chaos and confusion. Then it goes from that to now they're back heavily into this. He's an incarnation of Yanun, Panabab Nayun, the master of heaven and earth. Now here's the problem I got with that. Okay, Yanun deals with the healing green force, the healing light. If you are incarcerated and you say you suffer from angioedema, if you're Yanun, why can't you use the healing green energy to heal yourself of the angioedema? And how can you plead to the masses for a medical transfer from the same demons that incarcerated you, and you're going to go to the United States and federal government, and you're telling me that you're God, master of heaven and earth, and you want your followers to file these legal petitions to a system that cares nothing about you, and you want a medical transfer. So you're telling your people that the white man is the devil, don't do anything, don't trust the crackers, don't trust his political system. It's on all his lectures. Don't believe his educational system. Then on the flip side, you're telling me we need to petition the courts to get him medical transfer. Well, he's taking log of all this. You think you're going to go into the Supreme Court and they don't know everything that you said? And you think, yeah, sir, ma'am, can you please help us transfer our master teacher? I mean, need I say anymore? You get where I'm going with this. You can't do that. Now, the right way would have been to do it, and I suggested this when I was dealing with it, I would have put on a shirt and tie and played the whole role. They didn't need to know who and what we were. We could have manipulated the system just like they do to us for years. Play the role. They come in our neighborhoods, they come into Africa, and they pretend you're your friend, called the Red Cross. And they give you a hot sandwich and a Bible, and they pretend like they care about you. And we fall for it. And then after that, they wind up taking over the government, the whole country, and then African systems are wiped away, and now all these countries today have become Christianized. We got to learn to play, like you say, how things work. How do we play the game? Problem is, we haven't learned how to play the game right. We tend to want everybody to know I'm African, and I know this and I'm that. I have no problem putting on a shirt and tie and going amongst a certain group to do whatever needs to be done. Just got to learn how to play the game. That's the reality of it. So that becomes a mind. Same thing with the Nation of Islam. You got Farrakhan, you got the Bible and the Quran. Farrakhan, some divine being. And I believe we're all divinely connected. I'm not saying that some of the things that they teach aren't true, but some of it's ridiculous. He's the leader. He's connected to the high divine power. The Bible and the Quran are your rules and regulations. So how can you grow as a God if they're constantly telling you how to dress, what to wear, what to eat, where to go, who you can hang out with, who you can't? You got to follow these laws. You got to go to the mosque every week. You got to pray like this. That's a religion. You can't tell me that's not a religion. Same thing goes with the black Hebrew Israelites. The same thing goes with the Nubians. Now here's the game that they play with you. If you say anything that goes outside of their protocol, oh, you can't walk in front of Doctor. You can't walk ahead of you know this. You can't walk ahead of Pound the Bab Yanun. You got to walk side by side with him. So you're basically telling me I can't think for myself. You're not saying it, but you're subconsciously saying it. See, that's why I say the day of the conscious pimp is over. That whole structure with there's an organization and there's a supreme leader, them days is over. Nobody's falling for that no more. So that's why day of the conscious pimp is over. Shit is over. So if you choose to be with that, that's fine. But don't get mad at people like us that don't want to be with that game no more. Alright? Anyway, real quick, just to remind you, and people listening, the 3 upcoming shows. Next Thursday, May 28th, 9 p.m. Dr. David Imhotep will be back on the show Thursday night. Then Sunday, May 31st, we're going to have Dr. Delbert Blair back on 8 o'clock. That's Sunday night, 8 o'clock. And then the following week on June 4th, we're going to have Brother Panic back on. That's going to be a show on hip-hop culture and music. But we're going to get into the metaphysical and the alchemy and the spiritual aspect of it. That's on June 4th. June 18th, Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum's coming back on the show. And Sister Vera Courtney is going to come back on the show on the 25th. Alright? So don't miss that. Tune in for that. And that's about it. Okay? Peace.